Hey everyone, it's Rachel. In today's tutorial, I'll show you how to color realistic sand using the Color Therapy app. To achieve realistic looking sand, it just takes a lot of light layers with a few different tools. If you'd like to follow along, search for this image in the search box under sand. Alright, so let's start off with the brown 2 palette to tap in the sand. So I'm going to use the lightest color there and just tap it in. Now I also want to give it some context. So I'm going to tap in the feet with the skin color. I'm using the third color from the right on the top row of the skin shades palette and tapping that in. Also, if you don't want to keep the text, you can just fill that in as well with this sand color. Let's start adding details with the spray tool. I'm doing size 100 and opacity at 75. Over in the skin shades palette, I'm using the third color on the top row. And then with coloring inside the lines mode set to on, I'm going to just add some details into the sand, just a layer of texture basically. And then you can turn coloring inside the lines mode off when you're doing the text. Now over in the skin shades palette, I'm going to use the third color on the second row now. Same settings, let's add some more shadows now to around the feet softly. Here and there in the sand as well. Over in the brown palette, select the third color on the bottom row, and then with the spray tool, set the size 100 and opacity at 90. Adding a little more little highlights here and there, just more and more texture. You can also like dot it in if you want. And then just to warm it up a bit, let's use the last color on the top row of the brown palette. Just again, same settings, just add a few areas that are kind of orangey, just to like brighten it up, warm it up a little bit. Sand has a lot of variation in colors because of the rocks and the shells that it's made from. So we want to convey that. And then also let's use some yellow. So the first color on the very last row, do the same thing. A few areas of a bit of yellow, just layers and layers of color and texture. I'm mostly just tapping that in. Now let's choose the second color on the top row of the brown palette just for some darker shadows now. And just lower the opacity to 45 for that. And same thing. Let's just add in some more. This can be a little bit more shadows around the feet too. Over in the maroon palette, I'm going to use the first color. Same thing again. More little bits of color. And now we're kind of adding in a pinky tone. So the sand is just full of lots of colors. Now let's head over to the splatter tool. Let's set the size at 50 and opacity at 35. Go ahead and just sample a beige from the sand and just splatter in just a few little areas. And I'm using coloring inside the lines mode set to off. And this just adds in a little bit of texture. I would also focus more on the foreground because you're going to see more texture in the sand the closer are you up to the sand. And further back it'll be blurry. So I'm just dotting it in. But I wouldn't overdo it. All right, over in the brown palette, let's use the very last and lightest color. And now let's switch over to the crystal tool. Let's do size 100 and opacity at 1. Now we're gonna just add it all over the foreground. So you can have coloring inside the lines mode to off, where the text is, and then turn it on where the feet are. Just add in a lot of texture. But you don't wanna do every inch of it, so just leave a little bit for blending. Over in the brown 2 palette, select the first color on the last row. Switch over to the airbrush tool now. Size 1 and opacity at 35. Let's zoom into the feet and we want to draw the lines where we see them. Turning on coloring inside the lines mode set to on. And I'm just making little markations where the sand is being indented by the feet. So I'm just following those lines that are already there. You can also add in your own or add in some extras or follow the lines just here and there. But don't go too overboard with adding these little lines, just a little bit here and there. Now let's set the size to 100 and opacity at 35. And you just want to blend in smooth all around. So this will really just soften those shadows. You can add it here and there if you need, really softening the sand. And lastly, we're going to add some little dots with the pen tool. So I'll do size between 3 and 5. And opacity at 55, using that the lightest brown color that we had before from the brown palette, just add in little dots. I'll zoom in so you can see here. And you can clump them together sometimes. And they can also just have little lines and smear a little bit too, that's okay. And you can raise the size to 5. So I would just focus these ones in the foreground mostly, not the background. And that's about it. This tutorial is great to follow if you're coloring a seascape, but you can also use it to color a desert landscape too. If you'd like to see more tutorials like this, don't forget to subscribe to the Color Therapy YouTube channel so you don't miss any new tutorial videos. Thanks for watching our tutorial. You can get the Color Therapy app for free on the App Store.